I have been out on the road for 2.5 days looking at environmentally challenged sites in San Antonio and in Waco, Texas, and in St. Louis, Missouri. And I've also been fortunate enough to be able to fly mostly by private jet rather than an airline. Let me just see if I can share a picture of it. I'll talk more to your questions eventually, so I don't be coming through. Let me just continue here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So now it's on my phone. I'm going to share. I want to share a photo. See if I got more. What do you think? I've never done this. I've never shared a photo from
Yeah.
my phone when I've been doing it. Let's see. You just press share. Oh, it says photos. Ooh, cool. I can do it. Oh, wow. Awesome. I can picture these. So here's the plane that I've been flying around. Share selected. So are you seeing the plane now? No, because the plane came through. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Yes, I can.
You see the plane.
Uh, your audio is not clear to me, but uh, I can hear you like you know, the sound is not clear though.
Oh. Well, were you hearing me better before? Has it gotten worse now?
I think it's better now. Yeah, I think it's coming in now. Yep.
Okay. I'm trying to show some photos
Okay.
from the third person of me. And it says that it should be showing.
Oh,
It's not.
it's not showing yet. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It says it should be showing. Let's see. I'm going to go back to done. The options. Automatic. Should be showing. Weird.
Mm-hmm.
It don't have them on don't have them. These photos would not have transferred over to my computer because I'm talking to again my phone and I'm just watching what's going through on the computer. You know what? It shouldn't have clicked on share again. I did touch it. I cancel this. Do I sound any better now?
Yep.
Yeah, when you stop trying to show the screen, it's better. So let's do this. Let's see if I share on this. I'm not sure which of the ones it's supposed to be. I'm sure.
Okay. Looks like it's
That's
showing
working.
now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. But that's not the photos that I want, but I'll find them this one. So I'll close all this other stuff. There we go. Um, I'm gonna do 650. So this is what I've been flying. I'm not sure how much this flying right here. There you go. So that's what it looks like on the outside. And I'm not obviously going to be flying on that right now as I go back to Colorado. Um, is my voice coming in right now?
Um, the voice is it's okay. It's not super clear, but yeah, I think we can understand.
Weird, but if I share things on either device, let's have you do it. Look up, you see, look up, put a search mark for bomb, BOMBARDIER 650 jet. And it'll probably correct your spelling. So I'm going to stop sharing. Are you sure?
Okay, so
Yeah, is my voice better now that I'm not sharing?
yeah, yeah, better.
Hmm.
So, you want me to pull up that website or picture?
Yeah, it was actually just a picture, an image.
Oh,
So you pull it up, you
oh,
share
oh,
your screen, Bombardier, Bombardier, jet, Bombardier jet.
BOMBAR
No, Bier, bomb, yeah,
BAEIGR, right?
Bier. So put your screen up on, and then I can tell you how to type it in. Because now he's seeing it.
Yeah, if you can type it in the chat because I'm missing some of the uh things. Okay,
Get it?
Bombardier. Oh yeah, okay, I got it. I got this. All right. Okay. All right. I got images. Let me share my screen then. I'll share.
You're coming really well, dude. I mean, oh, and we're going to
Okay.
start sharing this screen. There we go. Let's pull up the one on the left. That's what it does look like inside.
Let's see what comes up. Um, right.
Did you go back to it? There's nothing on the screen now.
Not seeing it. Okay.
I go back to that previous one. No, just
Mm,
go to the tab that's right before we. Oh, there we go. There's a picture.
okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's the outside of it. And then there was an inside picture that was up on the floor.
Yeah. Here's the inside.
So, maybe blow that up. Make it a little bigger. There we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
That's
cool.
yes. Luxury uh private jet.
And then back in the back here is where if you put your cursor and go on the door, you see that. That's actually a luggage area. So,
So is that what?
but that's what the company I'm doing environmental for. So, um, so that put your cursor mark in the middle of the screen and the brown in the back. That's a door. That goes into
Yeah.
a store. Yeah, yes. That's a chair door. That's a chair. The cursor's on the chair.
Leather.
There we
Yeah.
go. That's the chair. Well, the doors in the building.
Nice.
Anyway, that's what I was finding. So now I'm going to do another search. I'll finish it. Just do a search for what I put in here. So I'm putting in, I'm going to show you screen again. We're going to do a search for that for Waco, Texas, Waco, TX, Owens, Blast.
I've got
Anyways, that's it. Yeah. Let's look at that first picture.
so
So that's
is
what I
it
was
the right?
visiting.
Okay.
Yeah, the very first picture, the very first one, all the way back there.
First one on the top.
Yeah, the very first on the left. There we go, on the left.
Okay.
Click on that. That took you to this.
Okay. How do I
That's not what the picture was. Get rid of that.
can't can't find maybe go back to this might be the same kind of picture.
Yeah, yeah, just see if there we go. That's actually a good one because it says that that's a newspaper article. That is the plant. That's the one view of it. It's a huge plant. You'll be seeing one little bit of it. A big metal object in the background. Is stainless steel, and there's the boilers where they uh, put sand and other materials in, and they heat it up to really high temperatures, and it makes glass. And that liquid glass goes into molds that are in different parts of this factory. This picture doesn't show very much of it. And then glass gets made. So go back to all those other pictures and let's just see if there's some other pictures on it. There,
So
that
here
one. Yeah, no, this one is to the
the
second
same
one.
one.
No, that one. That shows it from
Oh,
there. It shows it big the final one.
okay. All right. So
That's
this
another
might be
view. That is part of it. That's the boiler area. Let's just see other pictures. Yeah, that's going to show a bunch of it.
uh-huh.
There it is. It was built, by the way, in 1917. Very, very old. All of what you see there is the plant. That's the rail car coming into it, bringing in raw materials to make the glass, which is sand. Glass is made from sand. It's heated up to really high temperature.
Okay, so I think that's all the
So the other pictures are just It's just too. So this is an article about the closing of the plant,
Right.
which it closed a couple of years ago.
I can put the link.
Lots of environmental problems. Yeah, put a
Yeah.
link in and people can look at it.
Right.
We are buying it from Owens, Illinois, and it is not, mine. So if you're confusing the sites in Waco, Texas.
Right. Okay. So
It just talks about all the information about it. So that's where I was yesterday afternoon. So I'm going to put another link in there. But before let's see about Alicia's question. Says, any thoughts about using living shorelines to protect shorelines in America? Well, obviously, that's an incredible idea. I wish there were a lot more governments and any kind of entity that manages a coastline, property owner, whoever it might be, would realize that that's exactly what you need to do. That you need to have a shoreline that is natural or wherever it's located in the world. And in some places that'll be sand, in other places it'll be cliffs, and in other places it'll be wetland areas that are coastal, where fresh water is merging into salt water. And those would be marshy areas or rivers that are coming in. We call them deltas. All the big rivers in the world that create deltas as they hit the ocean. And if we're talking shorelines, I'm assuming we're talking ocean shorelines here in the question. And so in your country, Mark, I know you have a couple of really large rivers that hit the ocean. And all around us for maybe 100 miles in each direction from where the river enters, there will be areas that tropical, and most areas a lot more tropical than North America is. They call them mangrove swamps, and that's a natural living shoreline. And so a living shoreline is not necessarily great as long, but it can be awesome if it is natural, if it's what was there without man's influence. So I don't think it's appropriate to, for example, build a beach, a place where the natural ocean during its tidal movements up and down is hitting rocks. So, it's not necessarily, there's much putting up some views or some land areas and
yeah,
areas which is, I think that you're talking about pollution. Those are, those are
yeah, I'm
mangrove areas adjacent.
showing some pictures of mangrove forest in the this is Sundarban. Yeah, this is in my country.
Computers telling me that the battery's going dead on my phone because I got it plugged in. It should be charging, but it's not. Why it's not charging? Maybe being on the runway here is stopping it from charging. I may have to jump off this phone and just somehow figure out to be on the computer because this is totally killing my battery. Because it won't allow it to charge the same time as doing the runway. So I'm going to jump off that phone and just be on my computer here. I should go move
Right.
over and see. Um, will gas through various methods. I don't know if they do. I don't know. Right? We got some research and share this great. Right here, someone doesn't do a heck of a lot of good. But I've got to turn this phone on because it's going to go bad. So then we have to figure out what I use for a microphone here. I'm going to switch this to I'll turn the phone on. So one of me is going to go with another.
Okay, so let's see. Wayne jumped off on one of the devices. He might be coming back, but let's see. So anyway, people will wait for a few seconds. Let's see if Wayne comes back on. I see China released ecosystem restoration guides to boost coastal disaster resilience. Any thoughts? Okay, that's. I think Wayne will talk about that. Jointly issued by Ministry of Natural Resources. Okay, yeah. International Union for Conservation of Natural Resources, 2024, China, Island, Countries, Ocean Cooperation Forum. Okay. So let's see if Wayne comes back in a few seconds. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, we are hearing you. Hello. We hear you, but there's like bit of background, and we can. Hey, Wayne. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, take that out. How did you find it? Did you send it to me?
It has the same brand. It's not the same brand, but it's
No, it's showing up.
very, very simply.
It's the back of her. What I did.
What else?
Okay. Wayne, can you hear me now? Wayne, hello. Seems to be technical difficulties here. You hear background.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me, Wayne?
Oh, I hate that.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Get you on.
Okay.
Another one.
All right. So, yeah, I'll play a video. People. So stick around. I'm going to load up a video now. From Mark Shepard. Since um Wayne is having some technical issues. So, people, stick around for a video. This is very popular video from Mark Shepard that I'm going to play here in a
You
second.
missed that one, huh?
Okay.
My introduction.
All right. So this is the video from one of the episodes of Mark Shepard's Forest Ecology. So enjoy.
First, all of you, you've got a little dashboard on the right of your screen, and that's where you can put in questions and comments. And Mark and I and our other staff, and we've got a couple other people on here with us that will be looking. I actually thought that the person in Bangladesh I thought was our Mark from Bangladesh, but it wasn't. He's not on. So whoever's pretty cool, somebody else on here from Bangladesh. We're going to just cut quick on the introductions, just a couple things. One, the Facebook group. If you have not yet gotten an invitation, send me an email and I'll get you one for sure. At the end, when Mark's done today, I'm not going to do it now because I want to get him going right away. I'm going to show the Restoration Ag Smart Members site, which I've actually been trying to get all of you made as members of that, because that's where there's also a number of other free webinars and talks and different things that Mark has done, and other really great information about Restoration Ag. One thing while I'm remembering it, tomorrow I'm going to be a guest on a show from Regeneration International, and it's going to be with a group of other people. If any of you have any questions that you want me to ask them tomorrow, put it in the chat or email me later or something, and I'll just make sure I get it to them. That's at 2 o'clock my time tomorrow, which is Mountain Time. So if you get it to me before that, if you've got something you're wanting to learn about, and share it. There'll be a bunch of people from all over the world there from different groups. So if you want to have something that way, let's see what else. We're over 500 members now. Really cool. Had almost 200 that had registered for tonight. We're getting tons of people coming on here. So thank you, everybody. But lastly, this is your team. Mark's here to help you become better farmers and have aspirations and just to do things in a very, earth-friendly and profitable way for yourselves. So I think I'll use that as to stop here and turn it over to Mark, and all yours, man. Go for it.
All right, and I did try to advance the slides, and I can't do that, Wayne, so you'll have to. All right, of course, aerial photograph of New Forest Farm on the front cover. Can you see my black cursor there? I'm pointing to my name. Do you see that, or no?
No.
What if I share the screen? What happens there?
You know what? Maybe I can do this. Let me see this. If I turn the keyboard over to you, that might be what I need to do.
Yeah.
Keyboard to Mark. Let me do that. Let's see what you do if I do that. Maybe it gets to where you can have it now.
So what happened now? Is it theoretically mine?
It should be. You should have probably gotten an invitation. I had to say yes that I had given it to you. Let me make sure. I'm going to do it once more. Yeah, it says that you got it.
But there's it's not. Wait, it did one of those blinky things. We'll figure this out one of the years. So why don't you just go ahead and advance it, Wayne, to the next slide.
Yeah, and I've got to now find it at the bottom of mine.
Notice how I put the name here, that the Restoration Agriculture Forest Ecology Exposition. We don't need to see all of them yet. I chose the word exposition because it's a comprehensive description and explanation of an idea or a theory. Oh, wait a minute. What just happened here? My thing said leave webinar. I didn't want to do that. Okay, so go to the next one. Reason why I'm picking a exposition is we are explaining forest ecology, general ecology, landscape ecology, grasslands ecology, wetland ecology as best we possibly can, because that's the framework that we have to operate within in order to have a truly permanent agriculture or a permanent culture. And I'll do a little review here. Of course, this shows Tree Crops by J. Russell Smith, a permanent agriculture. First time I ever saw the two words together, permanent and agriculture, written in 1926, a big inspiration for me. It's available free online or print copy from Acres USA. Next slide, Wayne. And now we lost Wayne, right?
No, I'm here. I just, I don't know. There we go.
And I grew up in the industrial East during the collapse of the manufacturing economy. Formerly, on the left, we had rivers running of various different colors every single day. Whenever it would flood, there would be paper mache all over the stream banks. Within a few short years, just by leaving the river alone, it cleaned up. By no longer insulting it by putting in toxins, it cleaned itself up. Well, then by adding wastewater treatment plants, it was restored even better. By the time I was in high school, we were canoeing down the river. Next slide, Wayne. And next. Once more, context. I don't see how anything can be done out of context. I first went to Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts to study mechanical engineering, where I failed to thrive. I transferred out and went to Unity College in Maine, where I thrived in a big way, was one of the top graduates of my class, 1985. Next slide. So I immersed myself, I totally immersed myself in ecological theory, and it's only been in the last 10 or so years that I've realized how deeply this has gone inside of me. And I'm a ecology textbook fiend. And these are some of the sources that we've used for this series of webinars. Next. And of course, I ran away first of all to East Central Alaska, and you can't see my cursor says Wayne, but if you go straight ahead to that pointy mountain, you go around it to the left in front of the one with the big huge landslide on it, then you go around it to the right, and on the other side of it was where my homestead cabin was, and lived there with my wife and then eventually our infant son, doing what we could to survive within the ecological context. How do we as human beings live on this planet and not screw it up? Next. And again, it's Mount Sanford, 16,236. That's a view from my bedroom window in Alaska. Keep going, yep. And then it was while in Alaska that I discovered the permaculture, the word permaculture, the Permaculture Designer's Manual. Started with Permaculture 1, went to Permaculture 2. Next, by Bill Mollison. I began a written correspondence with Bill Mollison and took some of my training directly with Bill via correspondence. I'd write something and then mail it to him, and then he would review my work and send it back. He'd send me to interview with various different teachers around the world. Next. And eventually he granted me a diploma of permaculture design. And what I like about permaculture design is that I've tried to give this presentation on forest ecology. I just can't take it out of the context of permaculture, because we as human beings have a responsibility to live in an ecologically sound way. We have a responsibility to live on this planet, take care of our families and our children and others, and not mess up our nest. And the sentence in white here, it has been one of the central goals of my life ever since I first heard this, and that the aim of permaculture is to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable. That's what this webinar series is all about, to help you to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable. I am not here to teach you how to draw pretty pictures. This is not about permaculture design. This is about systems that are ecologically sound and economically profitable. We are practitioners. We're doing it on the ground. We're growing food. We're raising families. We're participating in the economy for real, not just drawing pictures. Next. That's a radical difference. I love that it's based on an ethic, care for the earth, care for people, and some sort of equitable economic system. Next. I also, while in Alaska, discovered this book written by David Holmgren. He was one of the co-originator of the permaculture of the term and the methodology. Next, in Holmgren's book, he set out a series of principles, and we unfold permaculture on the ground by attempting to follow these sets of principles. Next slide, Wayne.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it's not moving right now. What's going on?
Everybody look at that spiral in the middle and put your finger in your nose, look at the ceiling and spin around. And we're still, this whole series that we're doing on forest ecology, really is all about principle number one. We're going to observe, imitate, and interact. We have to observe nature, imitate its systems, and interact with it. This is not a couch sport. This is a roll up the sleeves and get your fingernails dirty kind of operation. We are going to actually observe nature. We're going to learn how it works. We're going to imitate how it works, and then interact with the system that we've created, that we have designed and implemented following nature's lead. And all the other principles follow as well. All of these will be embedded in what we talk about. Next slide, please. And from Mollison, once again, work with nature instead of fight against it. Do the least amount of work that has the greatest long-term effect. And think about that. Growing anything, any kind of crop for any kind of food or fiber or medicine, there's so much work if you try to grow something that doesn't really belong there. But if you just look at the ditch on the side of the road, there are plants growing in the ditch on the side of the road, whether you're in Arizona or Bangladesh or in northern Alaska or even in Saudi Arabia. There are weeds growing in this ditch on the side of the road. Pay attention to those weeds. They know something. They have some tricks. Let's learn what they are, learn how they act, learn how they behave, imitate that, and work with them instead of fight against them. Next slide. And we'll go through all of these. These original Holmgren principles and the Mollison principles are fundamental to this whole entire presentation. And then, of course, a lot of my work is inspired by Yeoman's Water for Every Farm, the Keyline Plan. Next, and we'll deal with that later on in a separate set of webinars. What I like about Water for Every Farm, it set this out, and this is really important. It has an order of operations. When going to a piece of land, we're going to concentrate on things systematically. We're going to deal, first of all, with the things that we have the least amount of immediate control over, and then go down to the last thing that we're going to do is the stuff that we have a lot of immediate control over, and that will change rather quickly. If you look at something like the climate, yeah, we do have an effect on the climate, and we can have a little effect on it, but it's not dramatic and it's not fast. If we live on mountains, there's really not much we can do about that except for blast the mountain apart. Yet down at the bottom, soil, we can play with soil. I can go ahead and lay 35,000 tons of gypsum on a piece of ground and totally change the soil chemistry in the snap of the fingers. That's a real quick change. It's real easy to do. It's one of the last things we do. If you consider this on a scale of like redwoods and radishes, instead of doing the radishes first because we think I'm going to get a quick cash flow in 3 weeks, if you do that, if you concentrate on number 8, work on the soil, work on the soil, work on the soil, you'll never get out of that. And look at where conventional chemical agriculture is, and look where organic agriculture is today. It's stuck on tweaking the soil, tweaking the soil, tweaking the soil. They barely get into pest and disease cycles, etc. And then how do they deal with pest and disease cycles? You fight against them with more ingredients. They'll never get off that quick return, short-sighted thinking. Whereas if we started thinking about redwoods first, knowing that in order to get a redwood, we have to go through a long series of succession through a period of years in order to get these redwoods established, we'll start with radishes. And so we need to be thinking long-term first, deal with that first, the big issues first. Climate, land shape, water, roads are more significant, more long-term. Don't worry about the quick turnaround stuff until later. Next slide, please. Oh, and Wayne's going to have to pay attention tonight. And so from Alaska, my wife and my myself and our infant son, Eric, who happens to be now 22. He's a geologist, and he's doing some field work up in the mountains in Utah somewhere. We moved to this part of Wisconsin to actually implement our vision of an ecological agriculture, which has come to be known as restoration agriculture. And that's our house, built our own house, earth bank, built in, we produce our own power, yada, yada, roof water collection, etc. Next slide. We're not just talking about it or designing systems for others, we're living it ourselves. And if you look at the context that we're in, the homesteads in this picture, the homesteads have a little grove of trees around them to protect them from the harsh elements. And everything is corn and soy, corn and soy, corn and soy in various different contour strip patterns, which is nice. A lot of erosion if we look in the foreground. There's some erosion down below. And yet there's this wacko crazy guy with this bizarre-looking, ecologically designed farm. And for you to have a farm like this, or ranch like this, whatever you want to call it, that's our goal, is we want to have actual practitioners on the ground, actually changing the ecology of this planet, interacting with the hydrology, rainfall patterns, wildlife, pest and disease cycles, natural succession, the natural processes of soil building, water purification, and on and on and on, carbon sequestration. Next slide. Wrote a book. Next slide. Buy it. Acres USA. Next slide, Wayne. Okay, so distilled short and sweet, this is the restoration agriculture process, is to identify our biomes and its keystone species. This is primarily what we're working on in this webinar series right here. Although it's one little bullet point, identify your biomes and the keystone species, it's vast in what it encompasses. And so that's part of what I want to make clear here. I couldn't write it all in a book. It'd be volumes to write it all in a book. So let's have a discussion about it. And since each one of us is going to be interacting with our own particular property on the fly interactively through time, we'll be able to teach ourselves and learn as we go. We'll do our earthworks, our water management, we'll establish edible woody polycultures, then everything will follow the pattern that our water management pattern sets up. We cash flow through our agroforestry practices, and we manage forever and ever and ever. Next slide, please, Wayne. All right, we got to go through some definitions. A forest is a three-dimensional ecological system dominated by trees and other woody vegetation that exists in dynamic interaction with the earth-air matrix of the landscape. That's an official textbook definition. Someone last week asked about, well, what about grasslands? Do the same principles that we're talking about in forest ecology apply to a grassland? Absolutely, because a grassland isn't a thing in and of itself. A grassland is a phase in ecological system development with enough water, with a long enough time between disturbances, fire, landslide, chainsaws, etc. A grassland will eventually change into a forested landscape. So forest is not just the trees. It's all of the woody vegetation, and it's the interactions with the planet itself, the atmosphere, and atmospheric interactions are really, really important, especially when we're talking about trees. Next slide. Forests come in various different shapes and sizes. I wish I was I had the ability to change these slides, because we've got quite a few that we can pop through here. This is in Africa. A lot of the shape of the vegetation, we'll deal with this a little bit later tonight. The patterns, the structured layer of it, the shapes of the trees are determined by weather, by soil, by available moisture. If you notice, these trees have rather large trunks and limited branches and leaves. These guys are designed to not lose water. They're designed to store that water in their trunks for a long, long period of time. Next slide. So this is a forested ecosystem. This is a forested ecosystem. There are some places where it rains almost all the time, 3, 4, 5, 600 inches of rain a year. Water, can become a problem in production. It actually also sets up all kinds of issues with fungal diseases and so on, with light penetration. Next slide. This is a forested ecosystem. Patchy forests, tall trees, shrubs, bushes, vines, scrubby ground cover in various stages of growth. And in this picture we see on the right, there's some wheel tracks that looks like it's fairly regularly traveled by some kind of farm vehicle. Then there's like overgrown pasture, some pink flowers in the mid-ground, some big older standard trees, and all kinds of various brush in between. This is a forested ecosystem. This follows, forests follow the same set of rules and regulations, although they aren't rules and regulations. Worldwide, it doesn't matter whether it's a dry environment, wet environment, cold, hot. Next slide. And I'm showing all these pictures because I want you guys to see all the different forms that these ecosystems take. And wherever you live, it is in your best interest to imitate the form that natural vegetation communities take in your area. This is some chaparral, scrubby shrubland in California. Next slide. And even in a dry situation like this, these trees here may not have seen rain for years. There's a, I believe it's, see, I can't remember what kind it is. I think it's an almond tree or a pistachio tree somewhere in Iran. And I guess it hasn't had any rain for 120 years. And it's just, it's like the only tree, as far as the eye can see. If you were to try to go to this place right here and establish, go back right there. If you were to try to go there and establish a food forest, you have this concept in your mind of what a food forest is. Your concept is wrong. It's merely an idea. What we have to do is observe reality and imitate that. So if this is what your place looks like, this is the type of reality that we can strive for. And yes, trees are part of the system. Next slide. Where I was up in the far north was in the boreal forest region. You see these very tall, skinny trees adapted to heavy snowfall and a low angle light. It's a solar panel that's vertical. In the equatorial regions, a lot of trees have a very flat canopy this way because the sun's straight up above. In the northern polar regions, since the sun's coming in this way, the trees are tall and skinny because then they can optimize their solar collection on the vertical plane. Next slide. Even places like this, the taiga, which is even further north, colder, even more sparse trees, sparse vegetation. This is a forested ecosystem, obeys all the laws of forest ecology. Next slide. And some of my favorite forests to study are the miniature forests of the taiga and tundra. We can see the evergreen trees, the spruce trees here. They're very sparse, very few and far between. Oftentimes they'll form clumps because they can protect one another from the elements. But all of the ground cover that we see of various different colors here, are different woody plants. Much of the maroon and pinky purple is blueberry. A lot of the yellow is dwarf birch. Next slide. And until we get very, very far north and very harsh climates, we even get down to these miniature forests right here. You see these little spikes with all the poofy down all over the place. This happens to be a willow forest. This is a tundra situation just short of the Arctic Circle, and all those little spikes with the puff coming off of it are the catkins on willow trees. This is a forest. Next slide. And if you're in this part of Alaska, you would be best to imitate that type of forest form. Now, forests can be described different ways, and we'll deal with that a little bit later on. They can be delineated, and for ecologists, they need to be able to talk about units of area, units of size, units of similar species, units of similar hydrology, so that they can talk about something discrete and definable. When you take a bunch of these little forests together and put them in a region, we're talking about a landscape. And a landscape is a somewhat heterogeneous area composed of a group of different ecosystems with different interacting earth, air, and life going on. And a good example of like a landscape would be like the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. I believe this is in Basalt, Colorado, this one right here. So within this picture, this photograph, we may have different forests. We may have different tree cover types. So up high in the alpine zone, we may have some of that dwarf willow and dwarf birch. That would be one type of forest ecosystem. Then we have maybe some aspen stands. Maybe we have some gamble oak down lower. Maybe we have some cottonwood on the river bottoms. We have different systems, but they're all in the same place. So that's like the landscape scale. So on a larger viewpoint, we're looking at landscapes. Smaller viewpoint, we're looking at forests. And if we remember from last week, if we get smaller still, we're talking about individual stands of trees, which are clumps and groups of different trees that are identifiable. That this is obviously a stand of pine. This is obviously a stand of spruce. This is a group of beech, a group of aspen, etc. So the landscape is this larger scale that we're looking at. And if you haven't figured it out yet, ecology and restoration agriculture is a complex technology. Human beings living on the planet is a complex proposition. I don't know where on earth this whole thing got into our consciousness that things should be simple. What is the one true answer? I mean, there's no such thing as that on this planet. Everything is complex. It's complexity layered within complexity and wrapped within complexities. And so we're going to understand how to view things at the landscape scale, at the stand scale, and at the individual scale. We're going to zoom in and out and be totally comfortable with understanding all different levels. Next slide. So ecology is the study of ecological systems, which includes the climate, the physical geography, the physiography, the shape of the hills and valleys and mountains and rivers, the soil, individual plants, individual animals, populations of plants, populations of animals, and then the interactions between all of them. These are all different levels of understanding. We can be studying cows. We can study cow digestion, which is even smaller. We can study bacteria within the third chamber of a cow's gut, or we can talk about herds of cattle, or we can talk about cattle on the Front Range, or bison in the whole entire Midwest. All these different scales and the relationships between all these different individuals, populations of individuals, and interactions between all the different plant communities, the animal communities, the actual physical geography, rivers, streams, etc. That's the study of ecology. We are ecologists, practicing ecologists. Next slide. And I don't want any of you guys to be ashamed at all about using the word, oh yeah, I'm a practicing ecologist. You can't officially call yourself an ecologist because you haven't published papers with a PhD at the end of your word. We'll talk about that in another couple of slides. Now, forest ecology is the study of the forest organisms and their response to physical factors in the environment, the relationships between them, between individuals, communities, within the whole system, between systems. That's forest ecology. If you're going to focus on the grasses, perhaps you're a grassland ecologist. Now, a forest ecologist, and I think my next slide says this, isn't necessarily going to be thinking at the landscape level. But a landscape ecologist will be thinking at the forest level. And the previous slide did show some human settlement. As ecologists, we have to include humans in this equation because we are part of the biota on this planet. We have all kinds of things that qualify as the earth element, from pavement to buildings, etc., the constructed environment. And we have an effect on the vegetation, lawns and rain gardens, that sort of thing. Next slide. So we have to include humans in this. And some of you guys, at least the Colorado people, will know about that, know about this area. This is once again the Front Range of Colorado. A forest ecologist is a landscape ecologist, a person whose our domain of interest and practices encompasses forested landscapes of many different scales. And a landscape ecologist will be a forest ecologist, but a forest ecologist is not necessarily a landscape ecologist. Some forest ecologists never look at the larger processes. Some forest ecologists only look at stands of woody plants, etc. They never expand their lens. as restoration agriculture land managers, we are landscape ecologists. We are going to understand things at all these different levels of scale. Next slide, please. I already mentioned this, that we are actual practicing landscape ecologists. We are not confined to research or institutions. And this is something that we need to be proud of and hold our heads high. We engage in direct interaction with the actual ecology of the planet instead of studying it. And better than that, instead of studying it from books or online, we are actually interacting with the actual ecological systems of this planet. So our knowledge is a fundamentally different kind of knowledge than anyone who has a MS or a PhD after their name and calls themselves an ecologist. And I, as both a person who has the ecological education and the practical experience, I can attest to the fact that the hands-on practical experience is so much more in-depth and amazingly fluid and personal than anything out of the book or online that you would have gotten by being a research ecologist. And so where we are is we are landscape scale ecologists, and we are interactive landscape scale ecologists. Now, a restoration agriculture farmer will be a landscape ecologist, but a landscape ecologist might not be a restoration agriculture land manager. Look at this picture right here. This is pretty neat. This is a 14-year-old chestnut coppice system. All these trees were planted at the same time, very high density, originally planted at 4,000 stems per acre, in part to select for genetics that are superior. They breed, they reproduce faster, produce more nuts, pest and disease resistant, heavier yields. The section on the left has been thinned twice in its life. The first time it was thinned, we removed any other species that were coming in that were competing with the chestnuts that we didn't want to be growing there. A lot of what we've been removing in this particular plot is black locust and staghorn sumac. Well, then the part on the left in this particular picture here was thinned out this winter. The largest wood was inoculated with shiitake mushrooms. The smaller wood cut for firewood. The tops then chipped with a flail chopper. And now that there's more light getting in on the left, there's more grass over there. There's not as much of a duff layer going on. And obviously we're grazing cattle in the system. We're using knowledge of ecology, of how plants grow together in high density, how they change through time, how they affect one another, how light affects change the grass, how the grass changes the trees, how the animals interact with the grass, how the animals interact with the trees. We are immersed in this real time and making decisions as we go on the fly, working with the ecology of the system. Next. You've already noticed it, that there's different scales that we're dealing with here. And in the ecological world, they talk about the micro, meso, macro, and mega scale. And I don't exactly I'd have to look it up in the book where it is. But down on the micro scale, they're talking about meters square by meters square. You could be a genuine ecologist studying this little square meter of soil. I ran into some research, it's about 20 years now, about some ecologists who are studying the succession of caribou dung pile up in like Gates of the Arctic National Park. This caribou dung pile was some 30 years old and it hadn't completely decomposed yet, and they were watching how these kind of lichens took over first and these kind of mosses came in. And when I found the research, it had been 30 years, and that's probably close to 20 years ago. Here's this 50-year-old caribou pile that somebody is studying it. That's a micro-scale ecologist, long-term, long time, big time, but very small scale. So you can do things on a huge spatial scale, like planetarian scale, huge time scales, eons and eons and eons, or short time scales and small spaces. Next one. Another way to think about ecosystems is with the various different kinds of disturbances and the various different kinds of responses that they have to disturbances. And this has a similar, these charts have a similar layout. Size is the bottom scale. Each of these three blocks has three different examples. So from left to right, 10 to the 0 to 10 to the 12 plus is larger space, and on the upper column going this way is longer in time. If we look at everything from a disturbance event like what happened in our neck of the woods last night, huge windstorm, lots of wind shear, trees snap, kaboom, you know, it was like a 2-hour event, it was done. Well, the results of that disturbance, that tree got ripped over by the wind, will result in some sort of biotic response, which is the second block here. It may take 15 seconds to repair. Well, not exactly, because one of the trees that went down on my place was this big, huge 2-foot diameter hickory tree that's probably 150, 200 years old. It'll be another 200 years before that system has come back to a similar place ecologically as it was yesterday. So something that happens real quick can have real long-term effects. So we need to be able to think of disturbances, and disturbances is anything like a wildfire, wind damage, clear cut, flood, driving over it with a tractor, earthquake, landslide, all these different events. A grazing event, when animals come through and they graze, you think about, here's these beautiful grasses just about to set seed, and cattle come through and graze it all off. That sets that system back. It's got to recoup. It has to rebuild its root system, start regrowing its top, and send up another seed shoot. It starts the system all over again. We need to be able to think of our farms as ecological systems with various different disturbance events in there. And if we think of all of our actions, what we do, we're not just affecting today's work. I'm not just moving the cows now. What I do here today when I'm moving the cows is affecting things 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line. And it's not happening in a vacuum in ignorance. By understanding ecology, and this is why we're going through this, by understanding ecology and ecological processes, we have a rough idea of where things are going. And you'll see later on as we go through tonight's presentation a lot more of what I mean by that. Next slide. Here's a disturbance, for example, a fire. I showed this last week. There's different types of disturbances. I had mentioned the small scale, the quick ones. There are different types of disturbances in that there's small scale ones like the branch, the wind blew the branches off, or there's long-term ones like there's an earthquake in California falls into the sea. That's a big long-term change. Other disturbances that happen with regularity, a really regular episodic disturbances. Winter is a disturbance. A lot of ice storms, break branches, etc. That's very regular, very common, not as intense. Then there are other disturbances that may be more catastrophic but might be less frequent. Wildfires with flames this big are hopefully a long-term event, and you can see that it is in this case because you can't burn down a 60-foot tall tree unless you first grow a 60-foot tall tree. It might take you 100 years to get one. So this is a big event, somewhat uncommon, very catastrophic. It's not the end of the world. It just resets things again in a different trajectory in ecological succession. Next slide. So we're thinking of things on time scales, spatial scales, and then events, disturbance. And here's a windstorm on the West Coast. You know, 5 minutes, everything changes. All of the system, complete system resets. Like the chiropractor went a little bit too far and gave you a side kick to the back of the neck instead of making you feel better. Next slide. My phone just dinged. I better shut that off. All right, so we had mentioned scale. The scales matter. There's various different, if we're going to understand ecosystems, if we look at the macro level, oh yeah, I'm a macroecologist. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'm studying oceans, continents, and their major component parts. Well, the middle phase, the mesolevel ecosystems, they're things like the Great Plains, rolling hills, mountain ranges. And the micro level ecosystems are landforms, individual forest stands, swamps, lakes. And this paper right here, just as an example of somebody, fine scale, you even have to say it right up front, habitat associations of a terrestrial salamander, the role of environmental gradients, these like temperatures and rainfall differences through a period of time. If you look at some organisms, they may never leave a 10 centimeter square area. That's very micro scale, but all of the same processes that take place at this micro scale happen at this macro level, excuse me. Next slide. So we're zooming in and out by time and space. Next slide, please. And this was a slide I showed last week. And if whatever we're doing, whenever we're having our conversations as restoration agriculture practitioners, we need to have an understanding within ourselves, and when we're communicating with one another, kind of like at what level is this particular effect taking place? Is this something that we noticed at the cellular level? Is it at the organ level, at the organism level, or is it something at the whole entire ecosphere level? What scale level is this particular process? And just as an example, we'll get to it a little bit later too, one of the things that's at this macro scale is climate. The general overall climate of a region. There's really not a lot we can do about that. And what's even more significant is something like the bedrock, the actual physiognomy of the land itself, the physical geography. We can't really change the fact that here in the upper Midwest, we're on sandstone, limestone, other places. I was just up in Isle Royal a week or so ago. The island is mostly basalt. You can't change that. That's a macro effect way out at the outer ring here. Next slide, please. Just to say that us, restoration agriculture land managers, we need to think at all scales. We need to think at the scale of one cow poop in a pasture. Does it have bug holes in it? Are dung beetles taking it and rolling it away? Are there this kind of fly in it, that kind of fly? We need to operate at that level all the way out to the global scale in our thinking. How does the climate affect what plants I'm going to choose as my perennial ecosystem? How does the geology affect the plants that I choose to plant? So both ends of this scale are important for us as practitioners. Next slide. Now, something that's pretty fascinating, a way of understanding different ecosystems is to classify them by ecoregion or bioecoregion. And these zones that we see on this map right here, this is the Bailey system of ecoclimatic regions. And the ecoclimatic regions, I'm looking through some notes here, make sure I don't misspeak on what things might be right here. This is a combination of temperature, rainfall, interactions, day and night cycles. Like if you look at the northern polar regions and the southern polar regions, they have long days in the summertime, short days in the wintertime. And if you define things by similar climate patterns, not small-scale weather events, but the general climate of a region, this is one way to classify bioregions. And you can, Bailey's is the one that I've used the most often. There's also Koppen and Olson, and another one is called Holdridge's Life Zones. These are all basically the same thing, and what you'll find out is they all disagree slightly. It's just like human beings. So Bailey wrote his book and got all of his data together and puts his maps together. And combine them, or you compare them with Holdridge, and you combine them and compare them with Koppen and all that kind of stuff. These are just ways to understand. If you look at the Sahara region of northern Africa, if you try to grow anything in that yellow area that belongs in a green area, you might not have very much success. Or if you try to grow something pink in the yellow, these are just like the duh kind of patterns. If you want to go up to Greenland now and grow bananas, you can play with the microclimate all you want, but what's the expense and what's the chance of success if you go ahead and you try to do that? The easiest, most simple, most likely to be successful long term is to imitate the natural patterns that exist in your area, and no matter where you live around the world, there are plant and animal species that will live together and support human life. Probably even in Antarctica, though I haven't been homesteading in Antarctica yet. Next slide. And for the next few slides, if somebody is a genius and a wizard, it would be really great if they could take these different ecoclimatic regions and then later on soil types and so on, and overlay them all so we can see where they correspond and where they don't correspond. This is Holdridge's life zones. It's very similar to Bailey's ecoclimatic zones. And if you were to do an overlay, you would see that there's a lot of correspondences. What I think is useful about doing an overlay is if we see the areas where these patterns don't correspond, I think those are the spots for potential magic. Because if you're looking at the plants and animals, there's this kind here. If you're looking at soils, there's this kind here. You're looking at weather, it's this kind here. There's like opportunities for like a creative crossover in the places where they don't overlap. But like the center of the Sahara here, or the center of the Amazon, you better be doing center of Sahara and center of the Amazon techniques and tactics, or you're wasting your time. Next slide. You don't have to. Go ahead. Here's the North America map based on the Koppen climate classifications. You look at all these different names. These names are kind of important, see, because when we start talking about where we're from or what type of zone we're trying to work in, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I live in a humid subtropical oceanic highland climate. And then you go, oh, okay, right about there. So looking at these, you'll notice that the red down here in northern Mexico has a similar climate as Baja Mexico, Baja California area. The plants and animals that are in the red over in Mexico would be similar as the ones in central and southern California. Likewise, the blue maritime in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, would be similar as the blue up by Great Slave and Great Bear Lake up in Northwest Territories. And so if you live up in the Northwest Territories and you don't have a whole host of species at your disposal, go look over at Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, which is a similar climatic zone, see what they have, and then start using likely candidates that will work in your ecoclimatic zone. Next. So none of these maps agree with one another. These are all guidelines to give us hints at what to do. Now, what's really fascinating, it bothers me as a creative kind of person, a guy who likes to breed plants and animals, is to look at this, and what's fascinating is the #1 top driver of plant communities and animal communities around the world actually does happen to be soil. Well, not exactly. It's not exactly the soil, it's the parent material of the soil. And so one can get into this little funny zone where I kind of stay. It's like, well, no, the soil doesn't drive the plant community. The plant community made the soil out of this parent material. So if you're in an area that has the big green that you see going up and down the middle of North America there, all a similar type of bedrock underneath it, all the yellow, similar type of bedrock, the light green, similar bedrock, you're just going to have similar plants there. So if you want to go down to the southeast USA where it's all yellow there, and if you want to do something from the orange up in Alaska, even if you're getting it from southern Alaska, Oregon, and Washington, where you might have similar climate as like Virginia or Georgia, you won't have the same amount of success if you stick with things that are more similar to your region in Georgia. It has almost everything to do with the bedrock of a place. And you think about it, if you like in my situation here, we have a dolomite limestone cap on top of sandstone. Dolomite is a calcium magnesium carbonate. Notice I said calcium, magnesium, and carbon. There weren't a lot of other minerals that I threw in there. Well, because they aren't there. Well, in the sandstone, it's a very high silica sand. So, you know, calcium, magnesium, carbon, and silica. Well, what about, you know, boron and copper and iron and all these other minerals that are necessary for plant and animal growth and for good health? They're deficient. That's where we get our notion of soil deficiencies, because if we have crops that have specific requirements, the bedrock will produce soil, the plants and animals interacting with the bedrock will produce a soil that can really only has the minerals that were available in that bedrock. So really it's the geology, the underlying parent material of the different ecozones that drives the vegetation that we see above ground. Next slide. Next slide. There he goes. And just this another picture. This describes the different soil orders. These correspond very, very well with the Bailey ecoclimatic zones. I'm a more of the Bailey Bailey zone guy because it more closely matches the bedrock patterns, which is pretty fascinating. So next slide. So you notice these last couple. First we were talking about climate. Well, then all of a sudden now we're talking about soil. So we're talking plants, we're talking climate, talking soil. There are different ways to understand the ecosystems that we're dealing with. Now, one of the things that affects climate, obviously, is north to south. Obviously, the North Pole, South Pole are much colder in the winter times, cooler in the summer times. The equators are hotter. Well, elevation has everything to do with everything as well. As the altitude, the elevation in the landscape increases, the air temperature drops by 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit, not Celsius, per 1,000 feet of elevation gain. Every 1,000 feet you go up, it's approximately 300 miles either north or south toward the pole. And so we've already talked about, we've got different time scales that we're dealing with, you know, different spatial scales, everything from a cow patty or a caribou dropping to the front range of the Rockies to the Great Plains. Now we're talking different weather, different rainfall, different hot and cold, different elevations. If we can get this computer right here to operate with code, and there's all kinds of people doing code nowadays, and they're acting as if they're pretty smart. They're just dealing with two factors, off or on. So 0 and 1, and 0 and 1. We can make computers that do this. Nature is zillions of different layers of code, different scales in time, different scales in place, temperatures, soil types. The periodic table of the elements has what? How many zillion different minerals available on it? The complexity of the systems that we're working with is off the charts. That's why it's important to understand these different classifications that we have here. So what I wanted to point out here on this slide as well, one is the temperature change with elevation. Also, the temperature and the soil, the climate affects the types of vegetation that live there. Grasslands, chaparral, which is a shrubby, grasslands. Mixed conifer forests, taiga, which was the widely spaced conifers that we saw earlier, and then tundra, the very low-growing vegetation at the extreme poles, and then of course ice cap, either way up high or way up north or way down south. Mount Kilimanjaro, right on the equator, has glaciers on top of it. It's like 17,000 feet high. Next slide. The Now, the physiographic method of describing ecosystems, it's not the climate zones, it's not the soil types, bedrock types, it's land forms, mountain ranges, drainage basins, large, lake areas. This is a real useful way of distinguishing landscape ecosystems because your weather can change, climates can change. So far we have evidence that our climate is changing pretty rapidly right now. But what's not going to change really rapidly are the mountains. Those Rocky Mountains aren't going away anytime soon. Unless you got places like Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Hood, they could go away overnight. But that's a radically different ball game. The physiographic method, once again, I'd love to have somebody overlay the ecoclimatic zones, the Holdridge's life zones, the soil types, and then the physiographic zones, just to see where they overlap and where they don't overlap and where these magical between spaces are, because we could really get creative with those. And once again, look at the scale from on the right, everything from a global scale to continental scale, North America, to California. We can even scale down smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you're studying this one little bowl or pocket. There's a couple of videos I did just looking at a tide pool. We can look at the ecology of a tide pool and learn so much about how that tide pool works. That's on a micro scale, or we look at the whole entire planet. Restoration agriculture, land managers, we're going to look at all scales and do our best to understand both ends of the spectrum and everything in between. Next slide. And then I'm going to, because of time constraints, I'm going to call it on, I think, this one and the next 2 or 3. If we start looking now, we can look at ecosystems and classify them according to their vegetation types. What kinds of plants are there? And if you look at the words here, we've got tropical rainforest, tropical semi-deciduous forests, scrub woodlands, and so on and so on. This is where we now want to start to focus in, and next week we'll zero in more on forest types. So within tropical rainforest, on our chart on the left, within tropical rainforest there'll be this kind of tropical rainforest, and forest types are usually categorized by the dominant tree species, the most long-lived tree species. So like in the northern coniferous forest, we'll have, white pine, jack pine forest, dry pine forest. How many slides ahead do we have, Wayne? Go to the next one anyways, because we can burn through this real quick because we'll repeat this. Go to the next one. That's the same thing. Climate based on vegetation. Next one. Okay, now see how I've been zooming in, going from the planet down to the North America, down to the USA, now to Wisconsin. Here's the early pre-settlement vegetation of Wisconsin. Now, everybody out here, go to wherever you live and find the oldest records of the vegetation of your area that you could possibly find. Even, paleological records, archaeological records on what it was once upon a time. They're useful for us. Next slide. And then this is what it is now. Mostly, the dark green and through is either hay, CRP, row crops, or soybeans in Wisconsin. It's like, how did we go from a three-dimensional perennial ecosystem to dominated by soybeans? Well, that's the history of agriculture, and that's why it's so important that we have a restoration agriculture, that we restore the ecosystem processes that were in place, cycling our nutrients, creating fresh, clean water, clean air, taking carbon out of the atmosphere, providing habitat for wildlife, pollinators, etc. Next slide. There we go. Now, everybody go home and find some sort of reference like this. I used this one, Wisconsin's Natural Communities. I know there's one for Minnesota. There was one for Alaska that are very similar to this. How to recognize them and where to find them. Next slide. Because this is where we're going to do our real work on the ground. Wherever you live right now on your real estate, you are now going to imitate what is there, or what should be there, what has been there, what's there in remnants. And just as a list right here, we've got like the southern oak forest. Notice how it's classified after the dominant tree type. Southern red oak, mixed forest. Sugar maple basswood, dry pine forest. So let's go to the next slide. These are just different plant communities that are part of Wisconsin. Next slide. And pine barrens, what I like about this particular reference is that it describes a little bit about what it is, what this system is, how it works, some of its functions, its ecological succession pattern. Next page. Some of the more spiffy wildlife you can see up top here. And the next one, in different parts of that ecosystem, like the dry pine woodlands, will have certain kind of grasslands within it that have its own little ecology going on.
I'm going to give you a little gift here, and that person is John S., who's still on here. John, you have won a little gift. We are going to give you a donation from Eat, a copy of Mark's book that I'm gonna throw in. So if you've already got it, John, we'll figure out something else for you. I'm sure Mark, we can even convince him to autograph it, but that's restoration agriculture.
That's signal. I can't hear a thing. That's
So John S., you have won yourself a book. And everybody, it's awesome having you all here. Same time, same station a week from now. Tell your friends about this. And
All right, everybody. So this is all the time we had today. Thank you for hanging out with us. And next week, maybe Wayne will be live with us again. And tomorrow we have Elaine Ingham, a replay from her course. So we look forward to seeing you again on this channel on our Eat Community live podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your day.